Oh,
Bound for Glory. It looks like TNA had a successful event over the weekend. We are going to be talking about the very first Bound for Glory next week here on the program. It went down on October 23rd, 2005. So next week will be as close as we can get to the 20-year anniversary. So we are going to talk about the '05 show. But over the weekend, it looks like TNA actually set their all-time attendance record, which is high fives all around for them. When you see news like that, your baby is still alive and kicking and it celebrated its largest attendance yet, how does that strike you?
well, you know what? It's I don't say this because it's just my baby. That's super biased, I guess you could say. But the industry, when you have another promotion being successful, that's good for everyone involved. And how long ago did they change it back to TNA?
Couple years.
But 2 years by now, right? I think around 2 years. I think about, look, history will, and there's always going to be ups and downs, no matter what promotion, no matter what creative, no matter what talent it is, what it is. But the TNA years versus the Impact Wrestling versus whatever it may be, it feels like the rebranding. And look, there's a lot goes with it. I'm not the WWE relationship has added multiples or zeros or whatever it may be when they're on a national television platform the 4 days or whatever that be 4 or 5 days before. That obviously is a huge help, but it's great, I think, for the industry across the board. And man, oh man, every time I hear a pay-per-view name, a Genesis, a Sacrifice, a Bound for Glory, a Slammiversary, it always does take me back to different creative rooms. And hey, guys, quit jacking around. We got to get to it. But Bound for Glory was always the biggest one of the year. And so you would know, hopefully 3, 4, 5, 6 months out and work backwards, sometimes a little more than that. So, yeah, man, hats off. Congrats to everyone involved. I saw one of the promo packages and the ID shoots of Team 3D. I still call them that, but takes me back to those days. But Bound for Glory, what was this weekend? Was this 22, 23?
This was their 21st Bound for Glory, but
21st.
it's the 20-year anniversary, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
I do want to ask you, it seems like there's a little bit of confusion between TNA fans. In your opinion, what was the TNA WrestleMania? Is it Slammiversary or is it Bound for Glory? I always thought it was Bound for Glory, but a lot of people I talk to act like it's Slammiversary. These were your babies. What was it originally?
Oh, for sure. Originally Bound for Glory. Slammiversary was the anniversary show, and more so the time of year than anything. You don't put your biggest show of the year in late June or early July. Some years it had to fall in July, I think, not many, but June, that is not the best month out of the year to run an event a la Great American Bash or SummerSlam or whatever it may be. But we always looked at Bound for Glory is the biggest one. That was in the fall by design. Halloween Havoc was the biggest for WCW by design. It was in the fall. Mania's in the spring, but we did Bound for Glory 1, Lockdown 2, and Slammiversary 3. And then the other 9 were, you could fluctuate.
Wait. Okay. That's interesting. So in your mind, Lockdown was the second biggest event, your other tent pole. So number 1 is Bound for Glory, then Lockdown, and then Slammiversary.
And by design, we wanted Lockdown, quote unquote. I always tried to have it. Dude, was this me and you, Conrad, over the last week or 2 or 3 weeks about innovation in the industry? And I've always, and I think this is drilled into me from my old man, and I'm a reader on different folks that, if you just do what you've always done, you have to be, and, Vince was always, don't get too far ahead of the curve. So there is a happy medium. I get that, but the innovation, but we always looked at, okay, how are we going to counter program Mania, glitz and glamour and presentation and a stage that's bigger than bigger than the ring, and they're going to load it up with stars and celebrities. We went the other way, an all steel cage format that essentially sold violence. So we went, what's the alternative to Mania in our world? That's how we went with it.
And you mentioned, spring and fall and all that. So it was by design that it's about 6 months out from WrestleMania. Did you plan that based on international fans and everybody trying to travel, like just trying to be cost conscious of fans?
If you really look and, you have to get into the DNA of Vince McMahon, the television season, this is dating because now it's completely changed and streaming, and hell, Raw's on at 7 a.m. at my house. So the world has changed. But if you go back to the 80s and look at how ratings used to be done and television was done, all the premieres were essentially in late September. We'll call it September, October. You took your first ratings book of the season in November, then you'd be February, then May. Well, there's a reason why that's because you got 3 of the most important months of the TV viewing season: start, middle, and end. And so Vince got through the holidays, and then he kicked up because that's when it's the winter. And so, east of the Mississippi, what is it? 70% of the United States population. I'm going to be off, but a big part of the population, they're inside. It's winter, the viewing habits, daylight savings time, all that. So Vince kicked off, and Royal Rumble was made as a counter programming, but it fit in January. But Mania is the season that he always built toward. And then he really finished his season. Back in the day, that's when he let talent go, did guys on overseas trips and all that. So the essentially, we'll call it from mid-January to mid-April, is when we'll say the WWF back in the day was firing on all cylinders and doing as much as they possibly could. They pulled off the gas in the fall by design. And that, I believe, is where Halloween Havoc became to such precedence and a little bit of a counter programming. And that's where WCW had massive success during that time in their heyday. And when we came in and having discussions with pay-per-view network or pay-per-view, the distributors and all that, they were like, hey, because let me go back, pay-per-view industry is going to promote the events that make the most money. That's why back in the day, if Tyson was fighting, even within a 3-week window, forget about it. They're going to promote Tyson because it's the biggest ROI. And so, to get the most promotion, and that is, what the industry, you go back 80s and 90s, it wasn't this big rights deal that now premium live events has turned into. So the pay-per-view industry, where can we get the most promotion? The fall. You're not going to get it in the spring. So the fall was a big thing. And so when we came in, obviously WCW went away. The in-demand, direct, dish, it was almost as if, wait a minute, you don't even know. No, we knew, shout out Jay Hassman. Hope that boy's doing all right. But anyway, you talk to Mike Weber, Jay Hassman, any pay-per-view marketer through the years traditionally absolutely knows that, okay, you're going to get the most bang for your buck. So that's where Bound for Glory was going to get the most promotional punch from everyone. And we were getting out of the way. So does that make sense?
It makes total sense. I do want to ask you about the thinking behind the big show. Like, we know that WCW did it, and before that, the NWA and Dusty Rhodes did it with Jim Crockett Promotions, and obviously Vince did it with WrestleMania and SummerSlam and all this sort of thing. Your dad didn't really do the big show. A lot of other territories, they would build towards Thanksgiving night, and that was the big annual show. And well, your dad just sort of said, hey, I just want to focus on the weekly towns. And I guess he thought, if I position one show as more important than the others, then maybe they'll start skipping the weeklies. And so then the big show becomes the one you can't miss, and they kill the weekly. Or what was the thinking, and how did your dad, did he ever come around to the TNA method of, we're going to have a big show, this is the new way? Talk to me about that.
During the territory days, his mindset was, and how he was very particular about this. And you got to look how long, it's the longest surviving territory out of all 22, kind of by far as profitability. And I think there's a method to his madness in that his mindset was obviously 52 weeks a year. And so May and September, kids getting out of school and into school, if they're getting out of school, vacations, there's a lot of money being spent on weddings and graduations. And he was very, because the socioeconomic area that we were in, you didn't have a ton of money flying around. So he would do a kids free or lower prices, or do that type of mentality to be very conscientious of how to keep his shows making the most profit. But when he would build to a big show, his mindset was, I'm going to raise prices $1 or $2 back in those days for a world title match. But he, and they used to chuckle at Nick Goulas, the old promoter around here, because every week, but Lance would do it on his own. Lance Russell would do it with his own style, but essentially saying, this is the biggest card ever signed. Nick Goulas would flat out just say, folks, this Saturday night, Nashville Sports Arena, the biggest card I've ever signed. He would literally say that every week. So it's a little oversell, but Lance had a way of subtly, he was freaking great at it, but making you feel that this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to come down to the Gardens on Tuesday or Coliseum on Monday, whatever it may be. So that was his mindset. He understood. So as we got into the TNA era, oh man, he wasn't going to argue with Success and Mania, because it was a different kettle of fish, because you're not talking about live event ticketing. Now you're talking about marketing and pay-per-view. And, he would always, he had a lot of music friends. Bobby Bear was a neighbor, and he had all kinds of music friends. And those guys were always in amazement going, now, wait a minute. Even Elvis Presley can't come back to the Mid-South Coliseum 52 weeks in a row. About week 4, people go, Elvis, you're great, but we saw your hits last week. So the music business, to this day, I think they're somewhat amazed at the amount of dates, that wrestling and all that, but the pay-per-view and the big money influxed in just makes our industry unique. And Mo Man knew that we had to pivot. So that wasn't, he understood. And, if me and him sat down over the last 3 or 4 or 5 years before we were passing, I would tell him just the different conversations, Conrad, me and you have, in that we filled, as we, TNA, went to a monthly pay-per-view because that's what WWE was doing. And we knew that our fixed cost, we didn't have to do 100,000 buys or 200,000 buys every month. It didn't. The only thing we paid extra on pay-per-views during that run was talent and travel. And that wasn't even that much, because sometimes travel, we bundled that with TV tapings. So it wasn't, but it's when we went on the road and took it on the road. And that's when those were the bad decisions. And that's not for here, but yeah, he understood the big show concept as time moved on. And not just supportive of it. He completely understood it.
SaveWithConrad.com.
My name is Rajiv. I'm in Sacramento, California. I came to Save with Conrad because I've heard Conrad talk about how he helps people all the time save money and the best route to go for getting some mortgages and finances done. And having heard so many different testimonials in the past, it made the most sense to go this route. We were in the market for a new house and we wanted to know what we could afford. So we spoke with Steve and then Diane to get through the pre-approval process to see what we could afford. And then once we were able to understand that aspect of it, that was when we were able to shop around for a house to get a mortgage through Save with Conrad. Everybody on the team was great. Everybody really explained everything fully to where it was more in like layman's terms to where I could understand it as someone not in the business or having shopped around for houses too many times. So being able to understand every step of the process and talking with everyone on the team about that was really, really helpful. And it made me feel really confident that I was going the right route. I would definitely recommend Save with Conrad to others. I know that sometimes people look at it and they go, oh, they're based in Alabama, what could they help me with? But I'm out here in California and they were able to square everything away and get things done really quickly, as opposed to sometimes even people out here don't move as quickly as the Save with Conrad team. So everything was really well done. really efficient, and I would definitely recommend Save with Conrad to others. My name is Rajiv. I'm in Sacramento, California, and I was able to get into my dream home with SaveWithConrad.com.
Available, that's number 212, non-equal housing lender. SaveWithConrad.com.